Greetings everyone and welcome to the BlastCast. I am Jarvis. With me as always is the man who loves Windows updates, Lightning Dragon. So let's talk about the most important thing that happened this week. For those of you who don't know, John Pritchett, CIG's main physics programmer, has left CIG. Before he left, he had a very interesting post about the breakdown of how IFCS works. The link will be down below. I recommend giving it a read. We wish him all the best and look forward to what future projects he's going to be taking part in. And his last paper was really kind of a breath of fresh air. It clearly showed where the problems are. And basically it stems from people putting these values into the engine. See, the engine adjusts basically to what's put into it. It's made that way. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out. Basically, this is something we've been saying on this channel for quite some time now. Now, Lightning has got something, he's sent me some videos I'm going to be editing down and we're going to go over it. He basically took some of the values, again, it's our second part of taking Star Citizen values, plugging them in the Kerbal and seeing what we get, showing how the raw values are just way out of proportion. And I think, what, you made a Freelancer?
Yeah, I made a Freelancer and I touched on a Hornet again, but the Hornet stuff is mostly just brief, just to show an example of, you know, something that's smaller and easier to build.
Yeah, and once I get that edited down, that might be coming out next week or later this week. I haven't determined yet. It depends on work schedule and other things like that.
So if you're interested in more KSP-related Star Citizen things, talking about thrust values and stuff like that, do look forward to that.
It'll most likely be a standalone vid, not part of a BlastCast, since we already covered it directly in an earlier broadcast. We wanted to show that the problems are kind of spread all around and do it in a way that shows some different kinds of ships. Alright, so let's get into this week's Around the Verse, all 11 minutes of it. They went through enhanced idle animations from NPCs when you're talking to them or when they're just basically doing whatever, so that they don't look like you're just standing there stationary when you're talking to them. They'll be doing other things as well. They showed us their new adjustable grip animations so that you can grab things of different sizes, and I'm going to go ahead and skip on all the possible jokes I can make with that. Showing off a couple new Xi'an ground weapons. They seem to match the aesthetic of the Xi'an Scout very well.
You mean they have mavs all over them and they're the worst performing things in the game?
Oh, no, not at all. They just have this kind of, I don't know, a Forerunner kind of technology looking thing, which the Xi'an seems to be focused on. They showed off some new deformation damage modeling. They show like this ball breaking through a wall, and it's supposed to be a more efficient way of doing it, and I hope some of this technology applies to ships on the outside as well. Showed off some trash landfill modeling, and lastly, they went over some Vandal Weapons, mostly melee, with the staff and the knife, and how these components and weapons are put together off of pieces and parts that they've managed to scrounge from their enemies that they defeated. So the most interesting thing that came out this week actually wasn't in Around the Verse, it was in Reverse the Verse, which had Chris Roberts in it. So let's go over some of the topics that were discussed there, and just kind of nail down some things we found interesting. One of the things that Chris Roberts talked about is how sometimes the devs basically filter out things that have a negative connotation, or they sound negative or argumentative or angry. We'll get into that in just a little bit.
That's an entire episode all on its own.
3.3 is going to be the biggest release of the year, and no matter what, the data calling and container system is the must-have piece of it. Without it, they're not going to be able to expand the Stanton system and have additional planets and things like that. So I totally agree, that's been something that really needs to be nailed down so we can really take Star Citizen where it needs to go as far as size.
That should have come out in 3.0.
Yeah, but they had to convert a lot of old items. It's been a conversion issue. See, when they converted to 64-bit, a lot of the old items were 32, and so they've been basically having to do these conversions, and it's taken a lot of time. Basically, they had years of assets they had to go back and retool. Now, while it's taking a long time to develop this first system by far will take the longest to build compared to what's coming down the road. While they have been developing it, they've been developing tools and other things to make developing these systems much faster, such as biomes and other things. The FPS AI was pushed back because they wanted to be more adaptive to all the different environments that it would be encountering, and they didn't feel it was up to snuff yet. Probably had people walking in the walls and stuff like that, like they kind of do now to some degree.
It's funny though, a lot of games have that problem.
Oh yeah. Even Skyrim's subject to it.
Yeah, I was playing Fallout and playing that a lot lately because of the DLCs now. I got them, but I often have a settler staying on a roof. It's like, why are you on the roof? There's no reason for you to be there, but something in their pathing will put them there. And when you load into that cell, basically, it puts them on the highest point in that path or whatever, And so if it's on a roof, they'll be on a roof.
That's pure Bethesda.
Well, it's not just Bethesda games that have that problem.
I know, but their bugs are fun. There was a question asked about the Squadron 42 roadmap, why it's not up yet. And that has partially to do with, as these things change, as they develop, they don't want to kind of put stuff out there that may or may not even be incorporated or may change drastically. They feel that they would get a lot of negative feedback if something was moved or changed or whatnot. More on that negative feedback stuff to come.
Like I said, we can have an entire video about that.
And one thing I do actually agree with and like the most was that they want to break down Around the Verse into separate shows. They want to have a show that's more focused on hardcore details of the game development for people who are interested in that. They want to have shows that are focused on a single subject. So, for example, maybe mining or refining or, FPS combat or quote-unquote flight. And lastly, they want to have a show for new backers or people interested in looking at Star Citizen that's a little bit lighter and more along the lines of showing off what they want to do. And they made a statement about how long videos, basically, people don't watch them as much because it's only like the hardcore people who watch longer videos, which means that people watching this show are pretty hardcore.
Well, that's true for every video. If Star Citizen released a 15-minute video, they're more likely to have people watch it at the very end as opposed to a 20-minute video. And every 5 minutes you put onto that, it lowers it even more. It's just a YouTube thing.
Yeah, it is. All right, let's get into calling all devs. Yeah, question about life support systems. Will they have limits how many people it can support? And that's absolutely a yes. You'll start depleting your breathable oxygen as time goes by, and eventually people will suffocate, so keep those spacesuits handy if you overpack a ship.
They talked about non-combat equipment, and basically it's like, we're going to have an Omni tool, cutting, repair, salvage, tractor beam, or whatever. And I thought about that. And it's like, so basically like every other space survival game that's like ever been made, it's taken you guys like 5 years to figure this out.
Yeah, it's a little bit of, it's also a little bit of Half-Life 2 with the tractor beam on there, so maybe we can pick up saws and throw them at people, who knows. Also, it was asked, will there be a way to play in the persistent universe without fear of getting your stuff ripped off or shot down by their better players? And the answer to that basically was no. So, I don't know, is that slider thing not going to be a thing?
Well, people are going to be pretty upset if they're removing the slider.
Yeah, that would... there's some people who just won't play a game if they don't have the ability to not always... You see, it's not PvP that some people want to avoid. That's not the issue. It's being trolled. It's the attitude that you find in... Well, a perfect example. Just play Grand Theft Auto 5 online.
Ugh.
I mean, that's what it could turn into. And that's typically what happens on an online community when someone can sit, thousands of miles away from you without any consequences whatsoever and just do carte blanche to you. You end up with, Grand Theft Citizen. So that's why people want the option to basically step away from that.
It's interesting you mentioned that because... I want us to do a show, not technically about GTA or Star Citizen, but talking about Fallout 76 and in what they're trying to do and how Star Citizen can kind of look into that, and just kind of a general chatty thing about something different.
Yeah, that's fine. And as far as Fallout 76 goes, don't buy it on PlayStation. They're not going to allow crossplay.
Yeah, don't do that. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah. So let's get into what I want to talk about when it came to the discussion of developers ignoring quote-unquote negative statements and kind of the way I feel about it. So why is there so much negative from the community? Well, it's kind of because there's a lack of interaction these days. Look at John Pritchett's post. It had so much positive feedback and interesting questions. This is a genuine example of how communication is done. People posted detailed information with math and examples of how to make flight work, and none of it is talked about or responded to. Frankly, I don't think the guys who are working on flight mechanics have the knowledge to respond to it. Devs come on videos and they mock backers who dislike their perfect vision of how flight is, neither providing documentation of their objectives or what their vision is. And we only know it's getting worse. The game punishes players using flight devices. The more flight devices you have, the more obnoxious it gets. And I find that odd, considering that never seems to happen in actual flight games. Maybe this could be a clue to the problem? CIG would make way more money if the flight was good. Instead, they pull ship stats out of their asses and hope it works, ignoring every source of data presented. Just look at the commercials. They show commercial after commercial with flight that is absolutely nothing like what we have in the game. It's a prime example of false advertising. Flight is pretty much just like the stunt RC helicopters with people in it. 30+ G stop and starts, insane values, non-unified controls. 5 years in and your flight gameplay is utter shit, and completely ignored in every way. I dare you to make a commercial that shows how your ships actually fly in the game. I double dare you. But you won't. Because you know how your shit looks. The disconnect is real. And you ignore or insult every person who has provided data in an attempt to help. You do this to the point that they stop trying, and this is your doing. So harden the fuck up, as EVE Online developers like to say. Take account for creating this toxic environment and fix it. Flight is not a minor feature in a game that was pitched about flying ships. Are your feelings hurt? Too bad. Welcome to our world. At least we're trying to fix it. Later this week, we'll be covering more DCS as I do a bit more practice with the F5E and struggle and fail and fly into the ocean and explode. As we get ever closer... Well, yeah, it's a tough little bird. And we continue to show this as we get closer to the 30 play sessions, so I can answer the question, do I want DCS in space? And that should make for a very interesting discussion. Alright folks, well that's about everything for this week's BlastCast. As always, leave your comments and suggestions down below, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.